I'm sad today because Friday I had to ask a United States sitting president when he signed a proclamation about Dr. King if he was a racist. Again, I'm sad today about that. But with the patterns that have been going on and all the other issues that have been happening globally, this is the perfect place to be and for the conversation to be had. Not only is this the 50th anniversary year of the assassination of the dreamer, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., there are two more anniversaries. There's an anniversary for the Poor People's Campaign, 50 years. And there's another anniversary, 50 years after the Kerner Commission report. This is a big year. But I think back to a couple of years ago when I was in Selma with President Barack Obama celebrating the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday. If you took a sepia tone picture of that day and put it up against, or a black and white picture of that day and put it up against today, it would still look the exact same. The economics hasn't changed. Yeah, the black boys and black girls can go to school with white people, but Selma still looks the same. But what the irony is, just a few weeks ago in December, that black belt to include Selma, Alabama. You know, my friend John King at CNN likes to say when he's at the board, the black belt is about the richness of the soil. Well, I say it's the richness of the spirit. They change. The black people, that's what Mary Frances, the slavery, yes. I look to the fact that Selma put Doug Jones over the top in Alabama. 50 years later. The spirit once changed, but what does that change look like in 2018? And what are the lessons to be learned from the past as we move forward, as we are sitting in the now moment? And I want to go start with Dr. Mary Frances Berry, who I love sitting at the knee and listening to her wisdom and the stories that she tells. She told me a story just this week, and I want you to regale it, to give it to the crowd. When Coretta Scott King, the widow of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., was alive, they used to talk on MLK Day. And the question was, what was the question, Dr. Berry?
What would Martin do?
Use your microphone. Use your microphone. Your microphone. Turn it on.
It would be what we would talk about two things. One, we'd talk about what would Martin do about whatever was going on. You know, what would Martin do? And we would talk about it. And then we would say, she would say, well, what would Martin say? And we would talk about what Martin would have said about whatever was going on. And this was for years. And in between Martin Luther King Day, depending on what was happening around the world. And so I always ask myself, I just came back from speaking down in Tampa for their Martin Luther King celebration. And what I talked about is what Martin would say and what he would do about all that's going on. And one of the stories, you want me to tell the story?
Tell the
One of
story.
the stories one time was the LBGT groups had been wanting her to come out and say something in favor of the rights of people without regard to sexual orientation. And she told me, she said, you know, the men who were with Martin, and whenever she said that, she meant the guys who were in SCCLC with Martin. We knew which men, she didn't have to name them, have said I shouldn't do it because that's not my issue and that's not your issue, and Coretta, don't do it. But she said, now, we have to think about it. What would Martin do? And we talked about it. And of course, Martin, not only was he a race man and a class man, but he was a human rights man. And he believed in the rights of all people. And I said, that's how we have to think about it. And she said, yeah. She said, so Martin would do it. I don't care what they said. But she said, I tell you what, if you come down here to Atlanta and come out and stand with me, I'll come out and do it. And she said, now, what would Martin say? And we talked about that. But that was a story. There were other things over time. But I think one of the lodestars, and I often think about it myself whenever I am in crisis over some issue of social justice. You know, when we were doing Free South Africa movement, we were going to jail every 5 minutes. We would say, well, what would Martin do about this, that, or the other? What would he say? And I think that's an appropriate lodestar to try to think about on a day like this.
But you also said something about there were components of what Dr. King would do, though. One would be
Yes.
to organize, and what would be the
One
next
of the
piece?
things that he always would do about issues is to, and he learned over time, that's the other thing. I mean, he wasn't just born with so much wisdom that he didn't need to learn anything. And when he was chosen to be the leader by the people in Montgomery in that church, because he wasn't born as a leader with a little thing on his belly saying, "You're the leader," he learned when they made mistakes, like the Albany movement was a terrible failure. There were some failures throughout this, and he would learn. He learned how to strategize, how to organize, how to conceptualize, how to pick targets, and how to figure out what you were going to get out of some situation when you were trying to lead the people. Because, as he would say, an effective leader is not somebody who tries to lead the people and you don't sit around and figure out what you're trying to do or what the end result ought to be. You ought to organize. It's not enough even to be courageous and to be willing to sacrifice. You have to be smart and strategic about what you're doing. And so that, I think, is something we should all learn about what he did and how we go about this resistance that we're engaged in at this hour.
Leverage and resistance and
Leverage, that's another thing, leverage. I sometimes think that, and I said this to the folks in Tampa to see what they thought. I said, you know, if I were Dick Durbin and I was in the White House and the president said whatever he said, I don't know, you got two guys who like him who said he didn't, and one guy who hates him who says he did, and then other people running around in circles. But whatever he said, or however he said it, or whatever, I have been in the White House and had people say stuff that they wouldn't want me to say outside that they did, and I am not going to tell that story about it. But I used it, leverage. I always think about what Martin said about using for the people, for the cause you're concerned with. You know, and I would say, do you want me to go out and tell people that you did so-and-so, so-and-so, you said so-and-so, so-and-so? Now, this issue that I'm trying to deal with that I want you to take care of. Now, if I can get you to take care of that, then, you know, I might forget about what you just said or what you just did. You know, if you will do DACA for me and shut up, you know, I might go on home. So that's the kind of leverage that I mean.
so that's interesting. Bishop Jakes, Bishop T.D. Jakes is here in the house. I used to watch him when he used to go, get ready, get ready, get ready, get ready, get ready. But, you know, Bishop Jakes, Dr. Berry brought in what happened this week. The week started out with the president saying, you know, I want a bill of love. And then it turned to something drastically different. Is this about love? Is this about heart? This whole situation, be it immigration, be it any kind of policy that's on the table, is it about love or is it just about the numbers and what the economics look like?
Well, to me, first of all, thank you for allowing me to be on this platform. I'm way out of my league, but since I'm here, I might as well say something.
No, you're not.
It occurs to me that it is, in fact, about love. But love is hard to legislate. You can't pass an amendment that causes people to love. You can monitor, you can get a person not to say things, but you can't get them not to think them and not to mean them. And I think that's a futile pursuit for us as American people to try to manage the hearts of people. Only God can do that. Sometimes I wonder if we can even manage our own feelings and emotions. I think that at the end of the day, we will not rise and fall on the backs of what one or two people think or say, whether it is appropriate or inappropriate. We will rise or fall because we have not corrected failed systems that eat the underbelly of our society. And when you look at those failed systems like the criminal justice system, like the immigration system, like the education system, that causes underprivileged people and underserved people not to have fair opportunities, while this story is titillating and aggravating and a lot of other adjectives that I won't use, I think it is a distraction from the deeper issue that we must get to. It's not about personalities, it's about policies. It's about getting policies in place that will really bring about the kinds of change that will cause people to live a better life, that will really affect people who are underserved and don't have the proper opportunities.